Yu-Gi-Oh is a very expensive game, especially in this format, but it does not have to be. So here I have brought 5 different budget decks, all below the price point of about $100. So not especially the cheapest. However, they are at a price point where all the decks I need to be showing are quite competent and can definitely hold their own in the current competitive landscape. Now, I'm not going to be claiming that these decks are amazing by any stretch of the imagination, or that they're necessarily top tier. However, what I am saying is you can take them to locals and you can definitely get a win or two, or even top the locals with the list that I am providing.
Alrighty, starting off our budget list, our first budget list is going to be Sky Striker. Now, I like Sky Striker a lot, and I'm very glad about the fact that it is completely budget now. The entire list is under $100 for main and extra, including an optimized extra, which is really fantastic. So I just want to bring this list to you. Starting off with our monsters, we're only on 4 monsters in the whole deck, including hand traps. We're not on any hand trap monsters because we're going to be a blind second Sky Striker list. We're starting off on triple Sky Striker Ace Ray and then 1 copy of Sky Striker Ace Rose. These are the aces that we need to be able to pilot the deck in to its optimum capacity, and we only need 1 Rose since it's very searchable in the deck and tutorable. Since it is a Sky Striker monster, we're able to dump it to the graveyard with Hayate. It's a warrior, we can add it with Reinforcing the Army. It's a Sky Striker, we can add it with any of our Sky Striker spells, etc., etc. It's pretty easy to access. And same with Ray. Ray's still the same great Ray as it was before. Quick effect, able to summon a striker from your extra deck to the EMZ. And if a Link monster is destroyed by battle, lose the field because of your opponent, we can just summon this card from our graveyard. Really fantastic card, especially to keep our advantage going. So we are on 3 Ray, 1 Rose. For our Sky Striker spells and traps, we're on 1 Mecha Hornet Drones, the only one we're afforded. Triple copies of Sky Striker Mobilize Engage. 2 copies of Sky Striker Mobilize Linkage. This allows us to OTK our opponent, or at least put them in the range where we can do heavy damage to them, as well as getting advantage along the way. For interaction against our opponent, we're on triple copies of Sky Striker Mecha Widow Anchor, also able to steal our opponent's cards, as well as 1 copy of Afterburners and 2 copies of Shark Cannon. And our last Sky Striker spell in the deck is we are on 1 copy of Mecha Modules Multi-Roll. Now, we're actually not playing too many Striker cards, and we're playing a lot of non-engine cards, and that might seem a little bit suspect. But to be completely honest, we can get into the Striker engine without using any Striker cards just because of Azalea's existence needing 2 lights and or darks, making it pretty simple to get to our Striker cards via that route. So we're not necessarily too concerned about seeing a Striker card, but we would like to see them overall. For our non-engine, we're on triple copies of Pot of Desires in order to just dig through our deck and draw a couple cards. Triple copies of Triple Tactics Thrust. Now it's quite affordable because of the quarter century bonanza. 1 copy of Triple Tactics Talons in order to fetch off Thrust. 2 copies of Upstart Goblin, just so we're playing a 38 card deck. 2 copies of Lightning Storm. 1 copy of Feather Duster. 2 copies of Mind Control, 2 copies of Raigeki, 2 copies of Cosmic Cyclone. We're playing a lot of 2-ofs in this list, although you can always change up the ratios as you would see fit, especially for these board-breaking cards, because it is completely dependent on what you are expected to be playing against. I just feel like this is the ratio that I'm the most comfortable with. Sometimes I want to see it, sometimes I don't. You know how it be. 2 copies of Forbidden Droplet, and then our 1-ofs, 1 copy of Reinforcement of the Army, 1 copy of Called by the Grave, and then 1 copy of Infinite Impermanence for our Triple Tactics Thrust target for when we are going first. In our extra deck, it is a little bit all over the place. We are on 1 copy of Accessing the Go Talker, Charmers of Gloomy and Hita. Gloomy is really good for allowing us to get access to Azalea since it itself is a dark and it will summon a dark from our opponent's grave, which they probably are going to have because it is one of the most common attributes in the game. And our upcoming most common attribute is Fire, so we're playing 1 copy of Hita the Fire Charmer Ablaze as well. 1 copy of Espinus Lone, now that it's finally budget. 1 copy of Azalea. This is probably the most non-budget card in the extra deck, to be completely honest. Let's see what happens when we take it out. Yeah, it's like about 10 or so dollars, about $9. 1 copy of Zeke, 1 copy of Kaina, 2 copies of Hayate, as well as 2 Shizuku. We're only playing 2 Shizuku just because Shizuku wants us to play longer games, and we really don't want to be doing that because now we have the ability to close out games with linkage. We only really need to be playing 2 Shizuku, and then we're on triple Kagari, and our last card in the extra is 1 copy of Superstar Slayer Typhon Sky Crisis. In our side, we are playing one Surgical Striker Hamp. This is just an optional card that I wanted to show you guys. I'm not really going to be doing side decks for any of these budget decks, but Hamp is actually a really good tool in order to clear things that Striker typically can't clear, namely like unaffected boss monsters like Ultimate Falcons, anything that's like a towers pretty much, or can't be targeted or is unaffected by spells or anything like that. This is a card that we can use to remove it, and it's a searchable kaiju for the Sky Striker archetype. But that's about it for this deck. Now let us move on to our second deck. For our second deck, I have brought just straight up Branded. Branded's now budget. Like, it's not expensive at all to be playing the deck. We're not even really that close to the $100 threshold. We're at $84.13, and we even are playing something on the side. But I think you all know Branded. I know Branded. Let's just go down the list of cards and see what we're playing. Starting off our Branded list, we're on triple Aluber Jester of Despia, able to search a branded spell trap when it's normal or special summoned, and then it has effect if a fusion's removed from our board. We can special it from our graveyard and negate the effects of a monster our opponent controls till the end of the turn, which is actually useful and most people forget about that effect. We're on one copy of Quem. On summon allows us to dump a card that mentions Albaz from our deck to the graveyard, and when a card leaves either extra deck, we can bring back a card that mentions Albaz from our graveyard. So, really fantastic card. We'll only need to be playing one because it's a Despia and a Dogmatica card, so we can summon it both off of Titaniclad's graveyard effect during the end phase, or we're able to summon it off of our Branded opening. So, it's a really flexible card in that regard, and it really lets us set up some really sick Cartesia plays. Other Despias we're playing is one copy of Ad Libitum for our bread and butter combo, where we make a Mirror Jade and then set up a Branded in red in order to use the Mirror Jade, banish something branded in red to fuse into Chimera, pop a bunch of cards, and then Ad Libitum is one of the materials we use for Guardian Chimera, so we can bring back the Mirror Jade from banishment and then get to Mirror Jade again. You know, typical Branded stuff. It's what they do. So Ad Libitum is that's the only reason we're playing this card. Otherwise, it's honestly kind of mid, but you know, we do what we gotta do. We're on two copies of Tragedy. When it's sent to the graveyard by a card effect, we can add a Despia monster from our deck to our hand except for itself, or we can banish it from our graveyard to target a branded spell trap in our graveyard and send it to our field. And we can only use each effect once per turn, and we can only use one effect per turn. We're for our Fallen of Albaz related monsters, we're on two copies of Blazing Cartesia the Virtuous in order to fuse using our cards, and we can actually summon it from our hand since we are playing like the Albaz cards. So this card is actually really fantastic in this build, and I could even see playing 3 of it if we weren't playing 3 fusion deployment already. One copy of Tri-Brigade Mercurier. This card is just a hand trap negate when we have a fusion monster that mentions Albaz on our side of the field. So really good card there. It mentions Fallen of Albaz, so it's really easy to search. And also if it's banished, we get to add a card that mentions Fallen of Albaz to our hand. So all the effects are really great, so I don't see why we wouldn't be playing it. One copy of Albion the Shrouded Dragon is just a really great way to get cards that mention Fallen of Albaz into our graveyard, as well as it can count as Albaz while it's in our graveyard, so really fantastic stuff there. And then 3 copies of the Albaz himself. For our spells and traps, we're on one copy of Branded Fusion, the only one we can play, one copy of Branded Lush in order to insulate our fusion plays and to get searching when we get our fusion summons hitting the board. We're on triple copies of Branded Opening and one copy of Branded in red. Keep in mind, Branded Opening discards the card from your hand for effect. So if they ask, you don't have to discard. Really fantastic card. As well as the protection effect is really good on this card as well. Branded in red, allowing us to fusion summon, but it can't attack directly the turn. Doesn't really matter too much. Just quick play fusion is really fantastic for the deck. Also allowing us to add a card back from our graveyard to perform the fusion summon allows us to kind of skimp on the material cost as well, or even do something like re-triggering our Despian Tragedy effect, since it even counts if it's banished for a card effect. We're on one copy of Branded in white, allowing us to fusion summon cards using our hand and field as material, including a dragon, but if we have an Albaz, we can banish materials from our graveyard instead. And during the end phase, if it's in our graveyard, because it was sent there to activate the effect of Albaz, we can set it instead during the end phase. Typically, we're not going to be actually using Albaz as a discard to, super poly effect, but it is nice that we have a card that can kind of recuperate the advantage lost when we do that. And then our last branded spell or trap is one copy of Branded Retribution. It's a counter trap while on field, but the main reason we're playing it is because if we send it to the graveyard, we can banish it from our graveyard at any point to add a branded spell trap from our graveyard back to our hand. Typically, it's going to be a copy of Branded Fusion, although we can kind of flex it a little bit to add whatever we really need. But most of the time, this is just here to grab back our Branded Fusion so we can do it again next turn. We are playing a small Bestial engine in this list. We're playing 1 Bestial Lubellion, 2 Bestial Saronir, and 1 copy of Magnamussi. Also, we are playing a triple fusion deployment, like I mentioned previously, either being able to grab Fallen of Albaz or Blazing Cartesia. It's a fantastic card, especially given we are only playing fusions in our extra deck, so the downside doesn't affect us in the slightest. It is also a normal spell, which is relevant for our next card, which is 2 copies of Triple Tactics Thrust. Being able to grab either Branded Fusion or Fusion Deployment is really fantastic for this card. It can also grab Branded and White, but these are the main 2 cards that it is probably going to be grabbing, Branded Fusion or Fusion Deployment. And this card is really fantastic, and there even is space in here, at least in the price range, to even play another copy. But, you know, want to hit 40 cards by all means necessary. We're on triple copies of Effect Veiler. This card's pulling double duty because it is also a light spellcaster, so we can be using it to make Albion the Sanctifier Dragon. And then we are also on more hand traps of 2 copies of Imperm, 1 copy of Foolish Burial, which is a non-engine card, and then 3 copies of Super Polymerization, one of the really cool board-breaking cards that this deck gets to play. In our extra deck, we are on 1 copy of Grenguignol, the Dusk Dragon, because we are playing the Cartesia. There is probably an argument to be playing 2, but if you do play 2, I would recommend playing 3 Blazing Cartesia. This on summon allows us to just dump a high-level lighter dark monster from our extra deck or main deck to the graveyard, and then if our opponent special summons a monster using a monster effect while this card's on our field or in graveyard, we can banish it in order to summon a Despia monster from our extra deck, allowing us to basically cheat out our Despian Quertus. Also in our extra is 2 copies of Masquerade the Tax Dragon. We're playing 2 just so against certain matchups like Flu Under Ease, it becomes really difficult for them to deal with 2 of this card, especially if they're in defense position. So if we can get 2 Masquerade the Tax Dragons on the board, we can put them in a pretty difficult situation. We are also on the 1 Quertus, like I mentioned previously, the 1 Albion that I mentioned previously, although we don't have any real purpose for this in the main deck per se. We are I'm showing that you do have the option to play Gimmick Puppet Nightmare with the Sanctifier Dragon in order to do the gimmick lock, the puppet lock. So if you want to do that, that is an option. It fits within the price range, so do with that what you will. And then for our Albaz related fusions, we're on 1 Lubellion the Searing Dragon, 2 Mirror Jade, 1 Titanic Cloud the Ash Dragon. The main reason we're playing this is because typically it's an unaffected Bungus the turn we summon it, and it's also going to get really fucking big too. Or it is just going to be a card we send to the graveyard to summon Quem during the end phase of our turn 1. We're also on 2 copies of Albion, the Branded Dragon, and then for our Branded in Red card specifically, we're on 1 copy of Guardian Chimera, and then for our Super Poly targets or cards that we can potentially fuse into, is going to be Dragostapelia, Muddragon of the Swamp, and Garura Wings of Resonant Life. Now, this deck is really cool. It's a bit outdated at this point, and it's about almost 2 to 3 years old at this point, but I do think it's still quite a competent deck and it can take wins, especially at any level below like a regional level. Even at regional levels, it can still definitely compete, but I believe any level before that is really where you're going to see it shine. But now let's move on to our third budget deck. I don't mean to interrupt the video, but I do just want to give you all guys a heads up. We are quickly rising in our subscriber number, and I did want to make you all aware that once we hit 2,000 subscribers, I am going to be doing another giveaway. Now, I remember I did one once we hit 500 subscribers, and we did a special thing for 1,000, so I want to do something special for 2,000, and you see this beautiful mat right here? Well, it can be yours. I have 2 extra mats. There's one of them, and let me get that second one for y'all. I have 2 extra pristine mats for you all. So I got multiple of these, and to 2 lucky winners, I'm going to be giving one to one person and one to another. And the person who wins the overall giveaway is also going to get a full Orcust deck. I can't guarantee it's going to be max rarity, but I'm going to see what I can do, and I'm going to try and make it look nice and pretty for you. It's not going to be the full deck. It's just going to be the core Orcust cards. But I want to be able to give you one of you all the ability to play one of my favorite decks. So just something I'm doing for you. You can always pop into our Discord. I believe that's where I'm going to be doing the giveaway. The Discord's always going to be in the description of my videos. I'm going to have a little bit more details once we start rolling up on that, but I just wanted to make you all aware of that. Now, back to the video. For our third budget deck, I brought a deck that you probably were not expecting. I brought Snake Eye Fire King. Now, the Snake Eyes have actually become super budget with all of the reprints and the Bonanza and in the tins and all that. So they're actually quite a budget archetype now. And we can build a full Snake Eye deck, main and extra, for under $100. So let's go down the card by card. For Snake Eye cards, we'll run 2 copies of Snake Eye Oak, basically just extra copies of Snake Eye Ash to be completely honest, and then the 1 copy of Snake Eye Ash, and the 1 copy of Snake Eye Poplar that we are afforded, and then 1 copy of Snake Eye Diabellstar because we are playing the field spell Divine Temple just in order to up the ceiling of our deck just a little bit for our Poplar opens, and then 1 copy of Snake Eyes Flamberge Dragon just because we don't really want to be seeing it in our opening hand, we're only playing 1 copy of it. We're on 1 copy of Divine Temple, also allowing OTKs to be a little bit easier for the Snake Eye engine specifically because it does buff the attack of all of our level 1 fire monsters. And then 1 copy of the original Sinful Spoils Snake Eye. For our Diabellstar stuff, we're on triple Diabellstar, triple Wanted, and then triple Bonfire in order to search either the Ash, Oak, or Poplar. And then for our Fire King cards, we're on 1 copy of Fire King Courtier Ulcanix. If it's normal or special, we can destroy another fire monster in our hand or face of field, and we have to add a fire beast warrior or winged beast monster from our deck to our hand, except for itself. Then we can make its level become the added monster's level, which is really good for our Xyz plays. If this card is destroyed and sent to the graveyard, we can summon a Fire King High Avatar Garunix from our deck in defense position. Now that's a specific monster, and we have that right over here. Here is Garunix. Once per turn during the next standby, after this card was destroyed by card effect and sent to the graveyard, special summon this card from your graveyard. If you do, destroy all other monsters on the field. When this card is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, you can special summon 1 Fire King monster from your deck, except for High Avatar Garunix. Now, it doesn't seem that good. It is kind of an outdated card, but the main thing, it is a level 8 monster that we just summon off of this monster if it's destroyed, so we are able to use it for rank 8 plays. We are also able to use, of course, the Ulcanix for rank 8 plays because it does level modulate, but we are also playing this just because it is a nice option to be able to just fetch a field nuke, or it's just a material otherwise. For our other Fire Kings, we are playing the level 1 Fire. In fact, we're playing 2 of them. 2 copies of Legendary Fire King Ponix, 2 copies of Sacred Fire King Garunix, 2 copies of Fire King Avatar Arvata, and 3 copies of Fire King High Avatar Kirin. For our Fire King spell traps, we're on 1 copy of Fire King Sanctuary. When activated, it just places Fire King Island from our deck in first face of field zone. If a field card in a field zone will be destroyed by a card effect, we can destroy a fire from our hand or face of field instead. And once per turn, if your opponent special summons a monster, we're able to immediately Xyz summon 1 Fire Xyz monster using only Fire Kings we control. This is another reason why our High Avatar Garunix coming back is quite nice, or even just leaving it straight up on our field in order to make our rank 8 Fire King during our opponent's turn, but we'll cover that once we get to it. And then of course we're on 1 copy of the Fire King Island as we need to be playing for the Sanctuary, and then 1 copy of Fire King Sky Burn as a removal spell. For our 1-ofs, we're on 1 copy of 1-for-1 and 1 copy of Call by the Grave, as well as 1 copy of Infinite Impermanence. And then for our other hand traps, we're on triple Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, and triple Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit. Of course, these hand traps you can modulate as you wish, although that may change what the price is looking like. Ghost Ogre is still quite alright in this format, just because Centurion is still around and kicking. We always want to make sure we're ready for it, and otherwise Ghost Ogre is just a pretty solid hand trap, to be completely honest. It can just kind of check a couple certain things. Like even this deck, it'll check the Fire King Island if there ain't a Sanctuary on our side of the board, so it can have its uses in certain situations. But that's it for our main deck. Now let's cover our extra. In our extra deck, we're on 1 copy of Relinquished Anima, 2 copies of Nightmare Phoenix. One of these is kind of like a flex spot, so you can kind of pick whatever you want for it. 1 copy of IP Masquerena and the 1 copy of SP Little Knight. They are gay lovers, of course. 1 copy of Promethean Princess, Bestower of the Flames. Now that this card is finally budget, fire decks can become budget all together as well. 1 copy of Nightmare Unicorn, just another flex spot to be completely honest. 1 copy of Access Code Talker. We're playing Ambler Whale because Raging Phoenix is a little bit above our price point, unfortunately, and Ambler Whale is just a pretty alright alternative. And then 1 copy of Underworld Goddess of the Closed World. What we are able to play instead of our Unicorn is we actually are able to play our Zelantis, because that card was also reprinted. So instead of Unicorn, and put that Zelantis in there instead. And then for our Tenpai matchup, we're on 1 copy of Fucko, And then for our rank 8 pool, we're on 1 copy of Dingier's Suit for either protecting our board or non-targeting, non-destruction removal of our opponent's board. Sanafon for Graveyard Hate against our opponent's deck in case they need to use their graveyard more than we have to use ours. 1 copy of Garunix Eternity, Hyang of the Fire Kings. On summon, destroys all other monsters on the field, and you can attach materials to pop back row. And then 1 copy of Hope Harbinger Dragon Titanic Galaxy in order to bring up spell negates if we really need to. If we know what our opponent's on and we need to be having those spell negates, because our archetype doesn't actually have any spell negates in archetype, this is the card that we can use to patch that weakness of ours. But that's going to be about it for this 3rd deck profile. Now let me bring you and show you that 4th one. For our 4th profile, we are on Spright. Our Spright list is actually quite cheap now that a bunch of cards have gotten reprinted, namely Spright Blue and Spright Starter got reprinted, as well as Gigantic Spright in the same set that Phantom of Yubel came out in. So all of these cards are quite cheap now, so I did want to bring this to you. Starting off our list, we're on triple copies of Spright Blue. If we control a level or rank 2 monster, we can special summon this card from our hand. Now please keep in mind the fire and dark sprites are marginally different. The dark sprites can special summon themselves if you have a level or rank 2 monster, so it's a level 2 monster or an Xyz, while our fire ones will only do a level or link 2 monster. Now please keep that in mind if you are playing that deck, because there are different restrictions on these cards based on what attribute they are. So that can affect how you are playing it, because I know a lot of people are not actually aware of that fact with the sprites. But Spright Blue on summon allows us to add a Spright monster from our deck to our hand, except for Spright Blue. Spright Jet on summon allows us to add a Spright spell or trap from our deck to our hand. Spright Red is a monster negate, allowing us to tribute another level, rank, or link 2 monster to negate the effect, and if we tributed an extra deck monster for that effect, we get to destroy the monster that activated the effect that we were negating. And then Carrot is the exact same, except for our spells and traps our opponents would be activating. For our Spright spells and traps, we're on triple copies of Spright Starter, allowing us to special summon a Spright from our deck, but we lose life points equal to its original attack, and then we're locked into level, ranks, and linked 2 monsters for the rest of the turn. And that is a hard once per turn on Spright Starter. It is nice the fact that it is a quick play though. We're on 1 copy of Spright Gamma Burst, allowing us to OTK a little bit easier, giving all level, rank, and link 2 monsters 1400 attack and defense till the end of the turn. And then during the main phase, we can banish it from our graveyard, target a level, rank, or link 2 monster, and give it a 1400 attack till the end of the turn. But we can use only one of those effects per turn. Really good for allowing us to OTK our opponents, or we can even do it in a damage step since it is attack modulation. We're on 1 copy of Spright Smashers, which is also just removal, allowing us to banish Spriggan's, Therion, or Sprite card from our hand or graveyard and activate one of the effects. If we banished a level, rank, or link 2 monster we control and one of a monster our opponent controls, and we can only use 1 Spright Smashers once per turn. That's the brain effect that we're going to be using, is non-targeting banishing a monster a card our opponent controls and one of our monsters. It is a little bit of a trade-off, although non-targeting banish is quite good, and it's a lot better if we know it's happening rather than our opponent knowing it's happening. And then we're on 1 copy of Spright Double Cross, attaching 1 monster on field or either graveyard. Targeting a monster on field or in either graveyard, then activating one of the appropriate effects, either attaching the monster to a rank 2 monster we control as material, or placing the targeted monster your opponent controls in a zone or link 2 monster points to and take control of it, or even special summoning the targeted monster from either graveyard to a zone or link 2 monster points to. And now on like a second glance, those last 2 effects seem very similar. So the main difference between the last 2 effects, I'm sorry it took me a moment, is one of them is referring to if you special summon the monster from the graveyard, and the other one's referring to if your opponent already controls the monster. So it's only going to be special summoning one, the other one is just going to be taking control of, or placing it in a zone your link 2 monster points to, and then you take control of it. For some reason. And then for other cards in the list, we're on triple copies of Nimble Beaver, double copies of Nimble Angler. When this card's sent from the hand or deck to the graveyard, we can special summon up to 2 level 3 or lower Nimble monsters from our deck, except for Angler. And then Nimble Beaver on normal allows us to special summon a level 3 or lower Nimble. So Beaver by itself is a rank 2 monster. And then if we do choose to go into Spright Sprint, we can dump our Nimble Angler in order to special summon 2 beavers from our deck since they are level 3 or lower nimbles, so allowing us to also get a rank 2 that way, as well as keeping our link 2 around. We're on 1 copy of EMP Meow Mine, just a really powerful card for these link strategies. It is a level 2 monster, so we can get it right on a deck with our Spright Sprint. It's just a very powerful card for this deck altogether. And then for our hand trap mitigation tools, we're on 1 Call by the Grave, 2 copies of Triple Tactics Talents, and then for our hand traps that we're playing ourselves, we're on triple copies of Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, triple copies of Infinite Impermanence, 2 copies of Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit, triple copies of Effect Failure, and triple copies of Ghost Mourner and Moonlit Chill. We are playing quite the hand trap package. We are playing about 14 hand traps, it looks like, and with our last card being Angel Statue Azaroon, because we have managed to fit Silo Hat Rabbit into this list, even though it is a little bit of a pricier card. Speaking of Silo Hat Rabbit, we are on 1 copy of Silo Hat Rabbit in the extra, 1 copy of Spright Sprint, 1 copy of IP Masquerena, and 2 copies of SP Little Knight. Just because we are a Link 2 strategy, we want to be able to make sure we can go into this card multiple times throughout the course of a game. For Charmers, we're on 1 Hita and 1 Dark, because those are the main attributes our sprites are, as well as 1 Nightmare Phoenix, 1 Access Code Talker if we haven't locked ourselves, as well as 1 Crusadia Avermax if we haven't locked ourselves. And then in our extra for our rank 2 monsters, we're on 2 copies of Gigantic Spright, 1 copy of Djinn Buster that we can make with Spright Blue and Spright Jet, or Spright Blue and Meow Mine, or Jet and Meow Mine. And we just have to use a dark monster. We have to use only dark monsters for Djinn Buster. And this is just a monster negate. When they activate an effect, we can attach 2 materials from the card, negate it, and then we get to do a little bit of burn, and that's time in the round. So it's a neat card for that thing, and we do get a monster effect negation that isn't just Spright Red, so we can kind of stack up on the monster effect negations, which is quite nice. 1 copy of Sky Cavalry Centurii in order to get rid of problematic cards that we're playing in 2016, and then 1 copy of Onibimaru, the Soul Sweeper. That's about it for this 4th deck. Now let me bring you to our 5th and final deck. For our 5th and final deck, we have the lowest priced deck I believe I've brought to you so far, being Unchained. Now, Unchained, at least about a year and a half ago, used to be a very competent deck, and I believe it still is quite a competent deck. It's just being overshadowed a bit with how the Unchained package is being used in other Fiend decks, so I wanted to bring pure Unchained to you today. Now, this deck is quite good. It has the ability to play a lot of board breakers and non-engine. Everything past this Fiendish Rhino Warrior is spots that we can play non-engine in, and we honestly don't even need to be playing Tour Guide and Fiendish Rhino Warrior. It's just a better normal summon than most of our Unchained cards are. So that's enough yapping about the overall deck and what the state of it is. Let's get into the profile. Starting off our list, we're on triple Aruha, able to target a card we control, and then we're locked into Fiends for the rest of the turn, popping the card that we targeted, and if we do special summoning this card from our hand. And then all the Unchains are going to have the effect, or at least all the Unchains that I'm going to mention, that are going to have the effect, is going to be Aruha, Rikeya, and Sarama are all going to have this effect. Sorry for dawdling on. When they're destroyed by battle or card effect, we're able to special summon an Unchained other than itself from our deck, and that is a hard once per turn. So we're able to go like Aruha into any of our other Unchains, and if the Unchained that we get also has a pop effect, if we pop that one, we can get a different one, so on and so forth. It's like an unending conga line of assholes, which is great. Like, you know me, I like my conga lines. So we're on triple Aruha, we're on triple Rikeya. If this card's on field, quick effect, we can target a card we control, destroy it, and we can't special for the rest of the turn except for Fiends. This is just a card that allows us to trigger our Unchained cards. And then we're on 1 copy of Sarama, ignition effect. While this card's on field, we can target an Unchained card in our graveyard except for Sarama, set it, and if we do, destroy 1 card we control. If this card is on the field, is destroyed by a card effect, we get to do, the Unchained effect. Now, these upcoming monsters are Unchained Souls, which is a lot different than these Unchained Twins, and all the Unchained Souls will still have effects when they're either sent to the graveyard or destroyed or something, but they're going to be a little bit different than our Unchained Twins. Starting off with 1 copy of Unchained Soul of Sharvara, the only one we can only be playing 1 copy of. This card reads, during the main phase of this card's in our hand, quick effect, we can target 1 Fiend monster or a face down card we control, destroy it, and if we do, special summon this card, but when it's face up in the monster zone, we're locked into Fiends. And then if it's sent to the graveyard, we can set an Unchained spell trap directly from our deck, which is a fantastic effect. Being able to find your Unchained traps guaranteed is something the deck was really missing before this card came out, and I'm very glad to see this deck having this card, because it's exactly what the deck was missing. And now it's a shame it's missing 2 copies of this card, but shit happens. It's unfortunate. We're on 1 copy of Unchained Soul of Shiyama. We can target a card we control, destroy it, and then we can destroy 1 spell trap on the field. If it's in our graveyard, we can target a fiend or a face down card we control, destroy it, and if we do, special summon this card, but place it on the bottom of the deck when it leaves the field, and we can lose each effect of Shiyama once per turn. Overall, powerful combination of cards. They are level 6s, so if you did want to play the DDD Wave High King Caesar in your extra deck, you definitely can. It can replace one of these cards in here, but I opted to not just because I wanted to play with a more full extra deck. It doesn't really affect the price too much. I think the DDD Wave High King Caesar is actually not too pricey, so we can actually, yeah, it's about $1. So if you did want to play the Wave High King Caesar in order to do the Sharvara Shiyama, overlay them, and get this, that's fine. Just keep in mind, you're not going to be able to get that Sharvara graveyard effect until you activate that Wave High King Caesar, so it's a trade-off you kind of have to be thinking about when you're constructing the deck. For our other Unchained Souls, we're on 1 copy of Abominable Unchained Soul. This one's a little bit older, so it's not quite as good as the other ones are. It is a level 8 monster. We can only special summon it once per turn. If a card we control is destroyed by battle or card effect, we can special summon this card from our hand. If this card is special summoned, we can discard 1 card to destroy 1 card on the field that is non-targeting. And once per turn during the end phase of this card's in our graveyard because it was destroyed on the field and sent there this turn, we can special summon this card but place it on the bottom of the deck when it leaves the field. Now, keep in mind, we can only summon this card once per turn by any means. So if it's summoned and then it's popped in the same turn, we cannot be using that graveyard effect because it can only be special summoned once per turn. It is the first line of text on the card, unfortunately. So it is not necessarily the best, but it is an option that we can tutor to, especially since all of our cards allow us to just summon an Unchained monster from our deck, which is nice. And then our last Unchained monster is 1 copy of Unchained Soul of Disaster. While this card's on field, it has an attack gain effect, and then it has an ignition effect where we can link off using 1 monster our opponent controls into a Dark Link monster. Guess what the Dark Link monster is? It's SP Little Knight. But no, not just SP. We can also make Unchained Soul Oriyama or Unchained Soul of Rage. There's a lot of cards that we can make, so we can take advantage of this card a lot better than the Unchained could have before. It also has a float effect It also has a float effect. If this card on the field is destroyed by battle or card effect, we can target 1 Unchained monster in our graveyard except for Disaster and special summon it. So unlike the other ones that special summon from our deck, this one allows us to recur our lost resources by getting those cards back. And keep in mind that can also get back our Link monsters, which makes this card quite good if we want to be getting advantage back after our board has been broken. For our Unchained spells and traps, all of these spells and traps are going to have the same effect when they're destroyed by a card effect, allowing us to summon an Unchained monster from our deck. So I'm just going to get that out of the way first and foremost. So first we're on 3 copies of Abomination's Prison. This is just a Rhoda. We can add an Unchained card from our deck to our hand, and if this set card is destroyed by card effect, we get the Unchained effect. When we're on triple copies of Escape, we can target an Unchained monster we control and 1 card in the field and destroy both, and then has the Unchained effect. And then 3 copies of Chamber, which is just brings back an Unchained from our graveyard or even from our hand and has the Unchained effect. All of these cards are, except for Prison, of course, Escape and Chamber are a little bit like mid in terms of traps, but the fact that we can search them so easily with our Sharvara, and they are play starters when combined with either Rakea or Aruha, or even our Sharvara like previously mentioned, it makes these cards a lot better than they look like on the surface, so we are playing 3 copies of each. For our other engine, we're on 3 copies of Tour Guide from the Underworld and 1 copy of Fiendish Rhino Warrior. Now we're playing this engine just to make our Unchained Soul Lord of Yama. The idea is we can normal summon Tour Guide, special summon Fiendish Rhino Warrior from our deck, link summon into Yama, and then we have Chainlink 1 Yama, Chainlink 2 Fiendish Rhino Warrior, where Fiendish Rhino Warrior is going to be able to send a Fiend from our deck to the graveyard, being our Shiyama, and then our Yama is going to be able to add our Sharvara, or whatever Unchained we would want, from our deck to our hand, and we'd be able to continue with Shiyama in graveyard, so we're able to bring it back from graveyard and trigger more of our Unchained cards, or an Unchained card in our hand in order to keep playing. So that's the conceptual thought behind that. And then for our hand trap mitigation tools, we're on 1 copy of Called by the Grave, 2 copies of Triple Tactics Talents, 3 copies of Triple Tactics Thrust. For hand traps, we're on Triple Ash and Triple Effect Failure. Of course, you can go more into hand traps if you would like. You'll just have to cut some other cards in this list, and I am opting to play triple copies of Dark Hole as our going second tool, because it doesn't actually affect us as much as our opponent. It affects our opponent, and they probably won't be expecting a dark hole, especially if we commit cards to our board, or they might be less likely to negate it. That's my thought. I honestly am just playing it because I think it's funnier than Raigeki in this deck, so that's the reason why I'm playing it. I'm just trying to, justify it, I guess. But I think it is quite funny, and it is a normal spell, so we can grab it off of Thrust, of course. And then we're on one copy of Prosperity, because we actually don't need every single card in the extra deck, so being able to find a specific card with Prosp is quite good. In our extra deck, we're on triple copies of Unchained Soul Lord of Yama, got reprinted in the Megatons, so it's not quite expensive anymore. 2 copies of Rage, 1 copy of Anguish, and 1 copy of Abomination. You could probably add an extra copy of Rage here if you think you're going to be in grindier game states, but to be honest, I typically only go through 2 Rages when I was doing testing for this deck, so that's what we're playing. And then for our non-Unchained cards, we're on 2 copies of SP Little Knight, typically paired with our Unchained Soul of Rage, 1 copy of Nightmare Phoenix. It is a Fiend, so we are able to make this under our Unchained block. Same thing with Muckraker from the Underworld, same thing with Promethean Princess Bestower of Flames, as well as the fact that we are playing fire monsters in Sharvara and Aruha, as well as Nightmare Phoenix is here in order to unfire lock ourselves. 1 copy of Nightmare Unicorn, 1 copy of Accessing the Code Talker, and then an unexpected Fiend being Underworld Goddess of the Closed World, which we can make under our Fiend block from our Unchains, which our opponent might not quite realize. It's also quite a goated card in my opinion. I think it's a really good card. But of course, if you didn't want to play it, you can just put in the DDD Wave High King Caesar, but you might have a little bit of an issue with towers like boss monsters. But that's going to be about it for the video. Thank you all for watching. If you are watching this far, thank you to my 1 member. Thank you, Ari. If you want to become a member, please stick around to the end of the video. I go into more details then. But that's going to be about it from me. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll be seeing you all later. Bye-bye.
Thank you guys so much for watching the video. If you wanted to talk to more Yu-Gi-Oh players like yourself, I would highly recommend checking out our Discord server. Link is going to be in the description, as well as the QR code on screen. We do talk somewhat frequently about Yu-Gi-Oh and the current meta, so I would really enjoy to see you there. As well as we do recently now have channel memberships available on our YouTube channel, where we have 3 different tiers. We have Super Supporter at $2 a month, where you get loyalty badges, emojis, guaranteed comment responses, a shout out at the end of every video, as well as access to the members only Discord channel, where you get early sneak peeks at future videos. There is the Giga Supporter at $5 a month, where you have early access to all new videos about a day or 2 before they go up, as well as all the previous offers. And for $15 a month, we do have our final tier, which is going to be Femboy Fanatic. You get a guaranteed customized video every single month, as well as 1 hour of my time. Could be for anything you'd like. You want a duel? Absolutely. You want me to help build a deck? Absolutely. You want to play some Helldivers? Sure. I'll do anything for an hour once a month. But supporting does help me out quite a lot, and it does help me produce all of these videos. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll be seeing y'all later. Bye-bye.